Welcome back. In literally the last 90 minutes, 50 Republican national security experts are warning about the dangers of a Trump presidency. Now, these experts, and you'll recognize a lot of the names, they say that Trump would put the country at risk and be the most reckless president in American history. Names like former CIA head Michael Hayden, former Homeland Security Secretaries both Tom Ridge and Michael Chertoff, former top diplomat John Negroponte. And again, they're all Republicans, all serving for Republican administrations. Let's bring in our panel right now. Jeannie Zanos, professor of political science at Iona College and professor of campaign management at NYU. Good-looking guy to her side, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Hey, it's Monday. And Andrew Whitman, also strapping young buck, senior political correspondent. All right. It's like the guy can't get a break. He stayed on prompter. He laid out... everybody's done the math, said, we're talking $10 trillion in debt with a T this will run. But there was some interesting stuff in there that he said. And yet on the same day that comes out, 50 prominent Republicans from the Republican administrations going back from Ford to the most recent Bush are saying, forget about they don't support his policies. They don't believe he has policies. They don't believe he has any knowledge of what's going on in the world. And probably the most damning thing, Jeannie, he has no curiosity or interest in learning what's going on. Reckless and dangerous, that's not who you want with your finger on nuclear launch codes. And at the end, he's had a bad few weeks, maybe self-inflicted, but this does not help.
No, it doesn't help. And, it is self-inflicted completely because he's the one who has gone out there and made misstatement after misstatement after misstatement that has invited this from Republican colleagues who have said, enough is enough. We can't trust this guy with our foreign policy. And, I have to say that I think it's really important that not just Republicans, but Democrats as well, who are experts, whether it's foreign policy, economic policy, or otherwise, come out and say how wholly unprepared he is to serve. Because that is something that the objective media have been reluctant to say because it puts them in a position of being called biased. But it's absolutely what needs to be said, that this is a scary moment for a country when you have somebody on the brink, and he really could become president, on the brink of becoming president, who is absolutely wholly unprepared to serve. And his argument that he will appoint good people, all the holes are in it now, because the good people he could appoint would be these 50 people who have said, this is a completely unprepared person. They won't serve with him.
Which voters will that resonate with the most, do you think? Do you think it would resonate with independents or Republicans who are on the fence about whether to vote for Trump? Who does that really hurt Trump with the most?
I think it hurts it with independents and moderates who are on the fence. Obviously, his 30-40% of core supporters, they won't budge. Democrats have already moved. But I think it's those middle people who are still considering voting for him who will look at this and, it's got to be hearing this over and over and over again that they say enough is enough. We can't take this chance. Even if we don't like Hillary Clinton, we got to vote for her.
And it's interesting, a little backstory to it, Dominic. Apparently, a couple of them felt this way. They didn't have to twist too many arms. Once this was going around, they say, hey, I hear what you guys are doing. Put my name on that one, right? They facilitated the letter, and here it goes. It is unprecedented, I think. Members of your own party, or at least his most recent party, that are coming out and saying not only do they not support you, but they think you're dangerous for America. And again, these aren't schleps no one's ever heard of. You've got Homeland Security Secretaries there. You've got head of both CIA, NSA. You've got real players here, diplomatic as well as Homeland Security chops, saying you can't trust this guy. He's scary.
Well, Richard, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. That's what we're looking at right now. And as the professor articulately laid out, the moderates, they're hearing this. The independents, they're hearing this. People that still are on the fence on whether or not to vote for Hillary Clinton or for Donald Trump or possibly for a third-party candidate. But I will say, it is still early.
I got it. And one small addendum, Andrew, you would think if today's speech was trying to convey one thing other than his economic plan is that he can be disciplined, he can stay on message. Today, you have a Trump advisor who is coming out saying, praising Putin, and again condemning Obama. There's nobody that's running the shop to say, this is what we're saying today. Don't get off message. We're saying this 50 times. We're showing we can be adults here. That should have been the message. But again, what happens? Party faithful and people who you would think put country first before politics say, not this guy. And then you have their own people still talking about Putin. How anybody thinks Putin is going to get you one vote, I don't get.
Well, it feels a little bit like the Trump campaign's playing whack-a-mole. I mean, they finally got their candidate to actually stay on message today, and now you have other people within the campaign who are mouthing off. Tomorrow, maybe they focus on keeping the rest of the campaign staff on message, and Trump is the one who goes off the reservation. But one other note about that economic speech today, looking through the policies that he was outlining, it felt very boilerplate to me. It didn't feel that much different from Mitt Romney's economic plan or John McCain's economic plan or George W. Bush's
Although it's a little
economic
different,
plan.
Andrew. He talked about huge infrastructure spending.
Yes.
He also talked about child care across
Yes.
the board, which is typically something you'd hear from Democrats.
But there's
saying.
no way to pay for it. And because
I'm
he's
not saying
cutting
it adds
$10
up, but
trillion
I'm saying
in
it's kind
revenue.
of interesting where he managed possibly to tweak some of the folks he'd like to write checks between now and then. Well, in terms of whether you believe him or not that he can deliver it, whether he lies or not is also a separate story. Voters, they don't trust Trump and they don't trust Hillary. Andrew showed you that at the top in the poll numbers. But when you actually analyze both candidates, you do find that Trump's pants are on fire. Nick Kristof did just that. Here's part of his op-ed from Sunday's Times. PolitiFact had found 27% of Clinton's statements that it had looked at were mostly false or worse, compared with 70% of Trump's. You got to try at that. It said 2% of Clinton's statements it had reviewed were egregious, pants on fire lies. That compared with nearly 20% for Trump. So Trump has 9 times the share of flat-out lies as Clinton. Washington Post fact checker has awarded it its worst rating for Pinocchios, to 16% of Clinton's statements that it checked, to 64% of Trump's. And it gets even worse for the Donald. Kristof continued saying, quote, in March, Politico chronicled a week of Trump remarks and found on average one misstatement every 5 minutes. Huffington Post once chronicled 71 inaccuracies in 1 hour-long town hall session, and that would total for more than a minute just there. And Jeannie, I think part of the reason why that everybody lumps it together, and I think you referenced, I think it was Rutenberg's piece in the Times, right, was the media's reluctance sometimes to call something for what it is because they don't want to be perceived as favorites, even if it's just stating what happened or counting the minutes in a speech where it's just complete bald-faced lies. It's dangerous when we all say a pox on both their houses because maybe one's got a problem, but if one's much worse, there's a distinction with the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens is people have a difficult time relying on the media because, the media is reluctant to say what is the actual truth, which is that this is a dangerous person. And if elected, this is what could happen. So you end up relying on these experts, as we've heard today and from this letter. But if they didn't come forward on their own, the American public is left out there, kind of swinging. And it's also interesting that we have more fact checkers out there in the media today than ever before, and they consistently pump out this information. But I have to say, talking to students, a lot of it falls on deaf ears because they hear over and over and over again, a politician is lying. Even if the difference is so tremendous between Clinton and Trump, the same message as a politician is lying. And they don't seem surprised by that at all. And they don't feel like, they're all lying, so I guess I have to choose between one of them, is kind of the way they look at it.
And you know what? Far be it from me to sympathize with Ted Cruz, Dominic, but apparently from within the campaign, nothing drove them crazier than it was Trump calling Cruz Lion Ted when they're like, this guy wouldn't know the truth if he fell over it. But if you say something enough, it sticks, especially if it's a soundbite.
But I wouldn't say that I would count on Ted Cruz in terms of my indication of telling the truth. What you have reported here tonight is a reflection of what happens when you get up there and you just wing it night after night after night. And Trump sticks a little bit to the themes of his speech, but he just wings it. And so it worked in the primary, but you cannot do that. And so he had a good day today, staying on message. Let's hope, for his sake, that he can stay on message and on prompter again tomorrow.
You want to make a bet?
I would make a bet. You know why? Because I think his people have told him, you have had a disaster of press coverage the last 2 weeks. If you keep this up, you won't even make it to the finish line. So I think he will stay on message.
And we joke around. I know God, I had a break, Andrew. We joke around about some of this stuff, but just think about some of the stuff he's lied outright about. And I mean, not shading the truth, just making stuff up completely. and destroying lives in the process. It's been bad.
I mean, it's almost too. I'm trying to think of examples. There are almost too many that I can't actually specify what exactly you're getting. But to me, it's an extension of what he did in his business life too. He makes statements that play to the room that he's in, and then he figures out a way. Well, I was vague enough, so I can put it like this. So I don't just think it's staying on message or it's winging it at the podium. I think that's how he lives his life.
Coming up next, when politics takes precedent over public health. Now, this part should make us all crazy. I don't care your political party here. Emergency funding for Zika has been stalled, and that could actually make the outbreak worse. Translation, we as a country have allowed government here to not protect us. We'll be right back.